Everything you see here are dice, but none of them are normal, and some of them are downright weird. Between different formats, probability altering shapes, and even different smells, these are some of the strangest dice that I've come across in just the last 8 months. And at the end, I will show you one that throws chance out the window altogether and replaces it with something else. This is a follow-up to a similar video I made earlier this year. And just like that video, I will leave links to everything I can in the description. Some are affiliate links and some are not. But with that out of the way, let's dive in. First up, we have two very different dice alternatives from a company called DodecaDice. This company tends to make some of the more consistently interesting, well-made, and dare I say, unique dice that I find. This is called the Wand dice, and there are 3 features that pretty much make it its own thing. First of all, every die type is represented by one of these spinning rings, which do spin very well. Now that alone isn't too crazy because as you'll see, the spinning concept is pretty popular right now. But when you look closer, you'll notice that it doesn't have numbers, at least not our standard Arabic numerals. Instead, it uses the Mayan numbering system, in which lines are 5 and dots are 1. So that's a 1, that's a 5, and 4 lines is 4 5s, which is 20. And third is that the wand actually separates from the base, which itself is the D20, which even has its own interesting design on the bottom. And while the Mayan numbering might not be for you, I think it contributes a bit to its overall esoteric feel. While we're on the subject of DodecaDice, the company that is, let me show you their newest dice. This is not currently available for sale because it recently had its Kickstarter, and at least at the time that I'm making this video, they are still fulfilling all the Kickstarter backers' orders, and they haven't started selling this on their store yet. I will do my best to update the link in the description when they do, so keep an eye out for that. But this is the Random King by DodecaDice, and it is basically a bi-directional roulette wheel. It relies on these ball bearings inside that spin and bounce around as you spin the inner ring and the outer ring, especially in opposite directions. Where these ball bearings land determines the number rolled. You can detach the face of the Random King to add or subtract as many ball bearings as you'd like. When I told DodecaDice that I was working on this video, they offered to give an exclusive 20% discount code that would last until the end of the year, which you can find in the description. Now we're about to move on to some dice that smell like desecrating a grave. But first, we have a couple of other spinning dice. This is a Pagoda dice spinning tower, which seems to take similar inspiration to the Wand dice. It's a very straightforward design with dragons and D20s on the top and bottom, because that's just what you do with these kinds of things. Next are these all-in-one dice spinners sold by a company called Dice. These are probably the most straightforward version of this trend, but the gear-like teeth in the side do make for some very satisfying spinning. With all of these spinning dice, waiting for them to stop can take a very long time, so just remember that a lot of times with these, don't be that person at the table who says, okay, let me wait and see what I get on my perception check. Just pinch the dice and stop them. This is the way. And finally, we have the SpinDice by DragonStone Gaming. This is a very similar concept, but with a bit of a twist. These are made with concentric rings that represent different die types. The twist, though, is that these are compatible with MagSafe. So you can clip them to the back of your phone, like so, and carry around a set or subset of dice with you anywhere you go. But now let's smell some dice. When I was at Gen Con back in August, I stumbled across the booth of a company called Studio Woe, and they were selling something very intriguing. Scented dice, but not just generic, pleasant aromas. No. For example, the set that I walked home with is called Cemetery Soil, and here is the best way to describe its smell. You know those Birdie Bots every flavored jelly beans that have stuff that tastes good and stuff that tastes bad? Within the bad tasting stuff, there's one that's supposed to taste like dirt. These smell like the dirt flavored jelly beans taste, but with a note of like petrichor or moss on top of that. The more I smell it, the more I like it actually, which is kind of concerning. Visually, the dice are pretty standard, but if you end up getting yourself a set of these, make sure you keep the box, and when you're not using the dice, keep the dice in the box. When I spoke to them at Gen Con, they explained how the box actually contains this little sheet that basically recharges the smell of the dice over time. But with these, you can match the smell of your dice to your character, and adds a new sense to the game in a limited sense. Now they do have other aromas as well, like arcane vapors and fireball chalk. But what if instead of smelly dice, You had Smart Dice. Well, let me tell you about Pixel's Smart Dice. This is the charging case for their D20, and inside of that you will find the D20 itself. And you can see it lighting up already. To quickly boil down all the features of this dice that you can customize with animations, conditions, and even send web requests using the Pixel's app, which is paired to the die. This can let you program it to have certain colors and animations play whenever certain numbers are rolled. And because of the web request feature, you could conceivably connect this to a website like Roll20 so that if you're rolling for your character online, you can actually roll for them in person and have that roll translate to the website. These Pixel Smart Dice came about through a Kickstarter, which they are still fulfilling. So right now you are able to place pre-orders on their website. Just expect several months lead time before you actually get them. Now, I have actually given away several pre-orders of these dice on my email digest called the Arcane Almanac. And if you're watching this video right now, you would probably enjoy the issues I send out every other Saturday. Because in addition to magic items, DM tips and ideas, and NPCs of the week, I also include a dice of the week, which highlights new, interesting, or strange dice like the ones in this video. You can join the Arcane Almanac for free using the link in the description. Now, this next set is initially going to look like a standard set of metal dice, but other than these kind of witchy arcane designs that you see on the faces, this Hexbreaker set by Die Hard Dice has one really interesting feature, which is its D4. They call this the Archimedean D4, and it has 8 sides. 4 of them are small, and 4 of them are big. According to Die Hard Dice, there is approximately a 1 in 20 chance of this D4 landing with a large side facing up. There's still an equal 1 in 4 chance of rolling a 1, 2, 3, or 4, but there's this added subcategory of rolling small side or big side up. And as it turns out, the chance of rolling big side up is about the same as rolling a nat 20 on a D20. This opens up the opportunity for some really interesting homebrew, in my opinion, such as a magic dagger that has a special effect that triggers whenever you roll large side up on this specific die. The most important question I have for you is whether you can call this a D4 or not. It has 8 sides, so you could argue that it's a D8, but it only rolls numbers 1 through 4, so you could also argue that it's a D4. I stand proudly in camp, this is a D4, because you can't use this in place of a standard D8, while you can use it in place of a standard D4. But let me know your take on this in the comments. Now, on a surprisingly similar note, we have a very interesting set of dice from the dice shop online. These are their DodecaDice, and at first glance, these are going to look like normal 12-sided dice, but they are not. They do have 12 sides, but they have different configurations that roll different range of numbers. This is a D2, a D3, a D4, and a D6. These are actually very pleasant designs to me because, kind of hot take here, I think the D12 is the best shape for rolling. So these have the best of both worlds of being whatever die type you need, while also being really nice to roll. Now, that same company, the Dice Shop Online, actually ran a Kickstarter this year, making something that I haven't really seen before. So their Kickstarter was for their miniature Gemstone dice. Now, I have seen Gemstone dice before, and I have seen miniature dice before. I have not seen dice that are both small and made of gemstone. That is a light blue cat's eye D20 of a very small variety. Isn't this guy cute? Speaking of miniature dice, this is another set of tiny metal dice. I mean, they are quite small. They are functionally pretty much the same as the CZYY miniature metal dice set that comes in the little, what is it called? The little necklace that you wear around. It's a circle, not an amulet. What is that called? A locket. It's a lot like the CZYY metal miniature dice that come in the locket, but these come in a D20 shaped metal cage that can also be worn as a necklace because it does come with a small loop. Now, these are 2 sets that I admit are a slight departure from this video, but because they are some of the most elegant, beautiful dice that I've ever received, I had to make sure I show them off here. These are both sets of handmade luxury dice from a company called Everything Dice. This first set is their Gelatinous Cube Chonk dice that have little skulls and weapons submerged inside them. I'm also a big fan of this D4 design, which comes through really nicely in the larger scale. They also make standard sized dice. Look at this. This is their Wyvern Spires set, and they have little snow-capped mountains inside the dice. This might be easier to see in the D6 with its flat sides, but I think these are so cool. So I had to make sure they made it into this video. Now, this is a very quick one, but this is a Liquid Core D100. D100s are nothing new. Liquid Core dice are also nothing new, but this is the first time that I had gotten one that was both of those things. Again, nothing too special, but I thought it was worth including on this list. Now, the last few dice I'm going to show you all have one thing in common, which will become very clear pretty fast. This first set is probably the lightest set of dice I own, and that's because they are assembled from a 3D printed dice kit card, which looks like this before they're assembled. Kit cards come with all the pieces you need to assemble them laid out flat and detachable, and the card in question here made this entire set of dice. On a similar note, we have these, which I also printed on the same printer, but these are solid PLA. The D6 probably looks the cleanest. I printed this in Overture's Rock PLA filament and their Silk Blue filament for the numbering. But finally, and without further ado, we have the final set of dice on this list, which are these. These are skill-based dice. This is a skill-based D20, and this is a skill-based D6. And both of these are actually my own design. The D20 was the first one I made and needs to be updated, but this D6 is a bit more polished. These are called skill-based dice because the way they work is you put a ball bearing at the start, and you navigate them in the style of your classic marble games to try to get them as far along the track as you can. The pitfalls along the way are different numbers, and the further you go, the higher the numbers go. So instead of rolling a die and relying on chance, you have the option here to rely on your real-world skill to influence the in-game roll. I am not advocating for these to be used in place of standard dice, of course, but I think they could be a fun option for more dramatic rolls in-game. At some point, I will design a full set like this, but right now all I have is the D6 and the D20. I will leave a link to the printable files of all the 3D printed dice that I showed off in this video. Let me know in the comments which of these sets was most interesting to you, or what other dice I should check out. And if you want to see more strange dice like this, you can check out the first version of this video concept right here.